looking live. It's Scotty John and Jeff Platt.
Last time when we weren't sure we were live. Hence why I thought that was important to just start. But yeah, it looks like verified here that we're live. I, once again, will really quickly introduce you. I don't know if I did that last week. Of course, you're a man who needs a little introduction. Jeff Platt, technical recruiter extraordinaire, doing business development here at KēSTA I.T. I, of course, am Scotty John. If you're watching this, you're on my LinkedIn page. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a spirited debate today. But before we do, I'm going to put myself on mute to make sure I can monitor the conversation and hopefully this week actually follow comments and questions because I'm sure we'll get lots of those. Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Take it away. Do you want me to tee it up? By the way, everyone, hello, how are you? The great and powerful Scotty John here. I got a LinkedIn notification to join the LinkedIn Live, so here I am. Scotty and I in our morning red zone meeting, for those who don't know what a red zone meeting is, our former tech friends know what a red zone meeting is, but it's our morning meeting where we talk about everything that's going on and what we're going to do. Scotty and I had a conversation about who would win in a wrestling match, me or Scotty. So if you'd like to opine on that, feel free to do so. I am not a wrestler. I don't think Scotty is either, but he is a hockey player and he's a damn good one. So can I say damn on LinkedIn Live?
You just did.
I'll try to keep the swear words to a minimum. My kids are always telling me not to swear. So, okay, so let me tee up what we're gonna be talking about today. Return to the office and the benefits of working from home and the benefits. How do I turn off my Teams notifications? I can't have this the whole time. See, is it Maeve or Ryan? Tell him to quit. Hold on, everyone. Here's another one. And people are probably like, how in the world does this guy not know how to turn off his notifications? I had them turned off and somehow they got turned on again. And here they are. 1 second.
I'm certain that, based on anyone who's watched us the last handful of times that we've done this is pretty aware that we're not exactly technically savvy, though we know enough to be dangerous. After all, we are technical recruiters. But yes, I feel that pain, Jeff.
Okay, I think,
Notification.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sure you did it, dude. I'm sure it worked.
All right, now how do I get you full screen again? There we are. Okay, here we are. Now I should not get interrupted with Teams messages. Let me take a quick drink of water. Today's LinkedIn Live is sponsored by KēSTA I.T. Return to the office. We're going to be debating, talking about return to the office, the benefits of working from home, the benefits of working in the office. Scotty will be arguing the benefits of working from home remotely and whether or not companies should be asking people to return to the office. Who knows where this conversation will go? That's why we don't really prepare. We want this to be free form, free flowing. We're just going to talk about what's ever on our mind. And then I'll be talking about the benefits of working in the office. So, yeah, what else, Scotty? What did I miss? Anything else I need to?
We got a comment, unfortunately, from the place that I monitor this conversation. I wasn't unable to see it, but figured out a way to go and take a look. And at least one individual out there believes that I would win in a wrestling match. I don't believe that they must not know you, Jeff. Because I think, Jeff, you're what, 6'7" and 280 pounds of pure muscle. Like you're basically a linebacker, or excuse me, a tight end, NFL tight end, right? This is all recollection. I haven't seen you in years, but in person.
6'6", 250.
Yeah, there you go.
It was a little bit heavier a few years ago, a little bit lighter at times. I hover between 240 and 260. So yeah. But yes, I do have a height and weight advantage, but Scotty has a professional fighter advantage. He's a hockey player. And if I've learned anything over the years, it's not to pick a fight with hockey players. They're professional fighters and they like to fight. They're like to fight Sky. I'm a lover, not a fighter. So I will defend myself, of course, whenever I need to, but I don't go around looking for fights. And hockey players look for fights. Not that Scotty does. Scotty doesn't do that. He's a gentleman and a scholar.
We'll debate that at another time. But for now, I know you're a fighter verbally, Jeff. I know you're a very formidable opponent. And to your point, I appreciate you teed that up quite well. So for those of you just joining, today we're going to be debating, not discussing, but debating return to office. So I have in my opinion, the clear winner argument, which is we absolutely should not be forcing a return to the office. I'll get into some of the nuance around that, but I just want to state clearly that returning to the office is a misguided policy, in my opinion. If you want proof, I'm going to let you go ahead and try to prove your point first so that I can shoot down all your arguments, because I'm certain that they're not going to carry any water compared to mine. But that is just to be unequivocal about it. I believe that remote work first and or hybrid for those who want to come into the office is the way of the future. Why are we trying to fight progress? Let's not be returning to the office. Jeff, your response.
Okay, so let me just start by giving my background on working remotely and working in the office. Now, pre-COVID, of course, most people worked in the office on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. I, of course, did. I worked for Tech Systems for many years and then went to Vivint, worked in the office, then Collective Medical, who was acquired by Point Click Care, and then Vendor, and now here with KēSTA. After COVID, when I was working at Point Click Care, it was like many companies, hey, we'd love for you to go back into the office, but it wasn't enforced. And most people, so Point Click Care has and had an office right next to my house. It's a 5-minute drive. I chose to go into the office. Actually, I probably went in 3 or 4 times a week, and I can tell you why. But most people decided to continue to work remotely. At Vendor, my last company, I worked remotely 100% of the time. And here at KēSTA, we work remotely. There obviously are advantages that you're going to talk about working remotely, but I'm going to talk about what I think we're missing by not returning to the office, why I do think it's a good thing that companies are asking people to return to the office. So one, I would say that I miss seeing people in person. And I'm surprised how much I miss it. I like seeing people in person. I think that the key to a strong culture at any company is relationships. I've always said that if you try and boil culture down, so I think a lot of companies have well, of course, they talk about culture and how great their culture is, and they have core values. But I think if you really break it down, the key to a good culture, and I think the strongest cultures out there are the ones where people have strong relationships. It's one of the things I appreciated about Tech Systems is that relationships is one of their core values. And I think it's the key to life and really to succeeding at work as well. And I don't think that you can really build strong relationships unless you see people in person. Yes, it's possible remotely. You can do it on video, you can do it through phone calls, but I don't think you can really build strong relationships unless you see people in person. And because that's so important for a strong culture and camaraderie, I think it's really important that people see each other in the office again. So that would be the number one reason why I think a return to the office is a good thing is because I think it's the key to building strong relationships at work. Now, when I say that, a lot of people confuse, well, do you have to be best friends with everyone at work? No, you don't. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with everyone you work with. But I do think a strong relationship is important. And I think that's the biggest thing or the biggest value, the most important thing you're going to get out of returning to the office. I think second to that is coaching, teaching, and mentoring. It's just a lot more difficult to do it remotely. The tools we have now make it easier. The video conferencing that we have, some of the technology that we work with that allow you to screen share. And, like in recruiting, we'll screen share with someone and we'll go through a resume, walk through it, talk about why a candidate's a good candidate or a bad candidate, or we'll come up with a sourcing or recruiting strategy. But at the end of the day, I just think it's easier and more effective to teach, coach, and mentor people when you're in person. And I think that we're losing a lot by not being in the office and learning from each other, and especially those people who are newer in their career and need to sit next to someone to hear a phone call or to watch them do something or to jump into an office and have a conversation. I just think it's a lot easier, a lot more effective if you're in the office to coach, teach, and mentor others. So that to me is the second biggest reason. I think third to this, and this is something I think is a little bit more controversial. Maybe we'll talk more about this. I'd love to get other people's opinion, but what we have seen with working from home is unfortunately, I think there are some people that are taking advantage of working from home. And I would say I think the vast majority of people are working hard from home. I do. But I do think there are some people who are taking advantage of it. And I can tell you at my last company, we think that there may have been some people who were double dipping and working for more than one company at the same time. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think people should be doing that. I think you should dedicate your time to one company and one company only. And I don't believe you should make policies for an entire group of employees based on a small select few, but there are companies that are trying to get a handle and a hold on that and have said, okay, well, we can get a handle and a hold on this, and we can verify people are working for us and only us if they're in the office every day. And just to clarify, I don't believe in babysitting. I don't believe in micromanagement. I don't think you should look over anyone's shoulder all the time. But I do see a ton of value in returning to the office. So that's how I would start this debate, is by laying out those facts. Scotty?
Well, clearly you're a gentleman who knows how to overcome an objection before it actually occurs, because you did just basically, my rebuttal to your 3 points there was, so you're advocating for micromanagement here, Jeff. Because, and listen, you drew the short straw, perhaps. I don't believe that this is representative of exactly your opinions, and those are relatively strong arguments. I'm not going to equivocate here because we were given some feedback that we didn't disagree passionately enough. So let me just tell you why you're wrong. So, number one, building relationships. Okay. Look, there's something to be said about water cooler talk and the opportunity to, run into people and have a little bit of a serendipitous type of engagement or interaction with a coworker. But there are ways to create that inside of a remote working community or company. It's not that hard to set up. We, like I said, we've got the tools now in terms of video conferencing, in terms of you just pick up the phone and call your coworker, right? Have a conversation, and it doesn't always have to be about work. I think that, and I think you'd probably agree, that we're doing a really good job of that here at KēSTA I.T. You and I had a relationship prior, of course, and I have had that with several of our coworkers, but there are people that I didn't know before. I feel like I've really built strong relationships with them, and I don't necessarily know that, in fact, I don't believe that had we been in an office that I'd have a stronger relationship with them. You can also meet annually, quarterly, whatever makes sense, in person for like offsites and getting to know one another. So that's the first argument that I think I've pretty much effectively countered. Number two, the training, right? So again, just to be clear, let me make sure I understand. So when you say that it's easier to train someone on when you're in person on a new job, help me understand and I am picking on you a little bit here. I know you have a more difficult side of the argument. Help me understand how that isn't, equal to micromanaging that. Like how, please, I want to understand.
So let me just reference maybe a previous company I worked for where I was working with the great and powerful Kelly Branham. Kelly, I don't know if you're listening or watching, but Kelly and I worked together at Vivint and then again at Collective Medical. At Vivint, she was our call center recruiting manager, which, by the way, might be the most difficult job in the entire world. I just want to give that plug to Kelly and also Brian Detweiler if he's tuning in. He did that at Vivint as well. That is a really tough job. High volume recruiting in a call center environment. That is not for the faint of heart. But when Kelly joined us at Collective Medical, we had her doing technical recruiting, professional recruiting. It was the first time she really did that full time. And Kelly and I did, and I think Kelly can vouch for me that I'm not a micromanager. But one of the things that we did to get her used to technical recruiting, more long form, in-depth recruiting, is I would listen in on her phone calls. I would actually have her listen to me do a G2, as we used to say at Tech Systems, but a phone screen. I'd have her listen to my call. We would go into a conference, we would call the person together, we'd have it on speakerphone, and she would listen to me do the call. We would hang up, and I would immediately ask her, okay, what are your thoughts? What did you hear? What questions do you have? And it was much easier for her and I to do that in person. Can you do it remotely? Yes, you can. I know you can. Um, but I think in order to really teach and see the full impact of that, I just think it's better done in person. And I think that Tech Systems or Legis Group or any other big staffing company is probably talked about this a lot because their model is, hey, let's hire people who are typically right out of college. They don't have any recruiting experience, and let's we're going to teach them how to be a great recruiter or an account manager. And I think in order for you to do that most effectively, you've got to be in the office with person. I think what you've seen and the difficulty I've had with doing it remotely, yes, we have tools that can help us do that. But uh, it's just not as easy to grab someone and go into a conference room or have them listen to a phone call. Like one of the values of Tech Systems is we were in a pit, and so everyone heard each other's phone calls, and there was ad hoc learning that was done when you heard Patrick Hardy or Karen Austin slash Karchner. When you heard them do it at G2 and you're like, oh, wow, they were really good at that. I think I'm going to employ some of those tactics. You just don't get the same environment, the same opportunity to learn, I think, remotely as you do in person.
Well, we're gonna sit here and quibble back and forth on these nice product placement on these particular points. But again, I think you might have to create more of an intentional process around it. But there's nothing in my mind that you can't replicate on that front in terms of shadowing, dialing into one another's phone calls, being on an all hands team meeting if you wanted to hear others do their thing. I think that's all something you can replicate if you are intentional. We'll get to the reasons why I think remote work and or a hybrid model where you have the option are make for a way better work environment here in a minute. But again, I just don't buy the argument that you can't get it remotely. It may be a little bit more difficult, but you can absolutely do. Now, one thing I should say for those that are watching, I know there's a handful of you, so thank you for being here, but please feel free to put comments in. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to go and see them. If you have questions for us, if you have comments about what you want to hear us discuss around this topic, if you want to tell us, either of us or both of us, why we're wrong, please put comments in. We want some engagement from those that are watching. Now, moving on to your final argument, and frankly, I just forgot it. I had it. I was like, don't forget, you're going to do it. But then I forgot what it was.
So the
Yeah,
three main points I'm making are building relationships, which I think is the most important one. And maybe we talk more about, can you build an effective relationship remotely? I still don't think you can. I think you kind of can, but not really. Two, coaching, teaching, mentoring. And the third one, mitigating, guarding against
yes,
some deception that is going on in the market right now, which again, I just want to put out there. I think that's a small amount, but it we do know that it's happening. How much it's happening, we don't know, but that was the third point I was making.
indeed, indeed. Okay, so let me address that point before I get into the reasons why I believe that remote is a better way to go. So at the end of the day, there are two different types of metrics when it comes to productivity at work. You might look at them as inputs and outputs. And typically what you need is you need a certain number of inputs to get to the level of outputs, right? Outputs being, hey, here in our business, it's easy. Sometimes I think in software engineering, for instance, it's a little more tough because I don't necessarily know that number of lines of code produced is a good output metric. And we can talk about that at a later time. Um, Having said that, you can measure both. And at the end of the day, what really matters, the outputs. I'm not going to argue that people should be able to work two jobs. However, if you hire someone and you set an expectation on what they ought to be doing, and you're a close enough and good enough leader to, identify how strong they are, what they're doing, where they need coaching, where they maybe need some different tools, et cetera. I think you should generally be able to gauge what good looks like in a job. And if somebody's actually able to do two jobs and meet all of the expectations and requirements that their company has laid out for them, I mean, maybe this is a hot take, Jeff, but why not work two jobs? All like now, most people can't, right? Hence why people get caught doing this and they get fired. It's usually like, oh, they're not producing. They aren't. First, you look at the outputs. Are they there? They're not. Okay. So in a company with a high degree of trust and autonomy, one that I would argue has an incredible culture, a culture you can often get from a remote working environment, better than a mandated return to office environment, you won't go to inputs immediately, but at some point you might say, the outputs aren't there. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at the inputs. If they're not there, it's kind of unequivocal. That time you go to performance management, our favorite topic from last time we talked, and you put a plan in place if necessary. They either improve or they don't. So they either quit that other job or they end up getting fired from this job. To me, does it happen? You're right. Not all that often, but sure, it happens. I think it's extremely rare that it happens to a point where companies aren't going to get wise to it. And at the end of the day, if somebody actually can do that and have no life, outside of two working jobs, then, whatever, more power to them. I think I'll take a person with two jobs if they're crushing it in the job I hired them for over somebody who has one job and is not crushing it any day. Again, hot take, but just to my mind, it's pretty clearly, it's easy to see whether someone has two jobs or not if they're performing, again, based on a very clear guideline and kind of upfront expectation about what good looks like in a given position, and then coach to those expectations that as a leader you've set up front. So that would be my argument. I'm happy to give you an opportunity to respond to that and any of the other things I laid out as counter to your argument before I go into why I think a remote first or maybe to a lesser degree hybrid environment is a better one, and why this return to office mandate is, in my mind, one of the silliest things I've seen executives want to do.
So real quick, I just want to put this out there. I'm not necessarily arguing for 5 days a week in the office because I do see a ton of value in a hybrid work environment, but I do think a return to the office is good. But back to, I do think it's a hot take. Hey, if someone can do two jobs and they're effective in both, why not let them do that? Yes, I think technically in theory, software engineer is a good example. So I would be interested, and maybe for another LinkedIn Live you do, or I do, or someone here at KēSTA does an interview with a software engineering manager or a software engineer to talk about their thoughts on this, because I will say the one community where I think that at least it seems like there's been strong pushback, and where I think they have more leverage than other skill sets or disciplines to do this, is software engineering. And it makes sense why why they feel strongly about working from home. I'm sure they can make the argument that they're more productive. I'd be curious to hear someone's opinion and perspective on coaching, mentoring, teaching, and software engineering, software development remotely, and if they see any difference between in person and working remotely. I do remember at a previous company someone saying that the relationship between product management or product and engineering is easier and more productive in person, but I'm not an expert there, so I don't know for sure. But back uh, to working two jobs at once, I just don't know how you can possibly do that. I would maybe give the analogy of being married. I don't know how you're married to two people at once, because I think your time and attention needs to be with one person or one company, and your focus needs to be there. I'm sure there are people who have done it effectively. And for those that are entrepreneurs, I'm sure they've done this in some capacity, but I really think that for both parties, for the employee and for the business owner or the company, that you need one company and one company only that you're working for. So I truly believe it's a more effective way to do it for both parties. But again, my strongest argument, what I believe the most, is the building of relationships and how important that is in person, because I just think we're losing something by working remotely. I think culture is affected negatively by people working so remotely. As a recruiter, do I want to return to the days of you have to find a software engineer that is within a 30-minute commute to the office, that has experience in Java? I mean, that I think back about that, and that was pretty difficult compared to what we're doing now, where the whole country or world is our recruiting pool. But I'm not necessarily advocating for going back to that. But again, I see a ton of value going back into the office, especially for building relationships.
Okay, so two things quickly before I get into the argument for a remote first environment. So number one, I think you're right that if you look at it on the bell curve, they're going to be there's going to be a very small distribution of people who could actually pull off working two full-time jobs at once. And nor would anybody want to. I think that's a recipe for burnout. I think that's a terrible choice, a terrible idea. My point is more that if somebody attempts to do that, they're going to get found out. Now, is there a cost to the company for that? Of course, but there's a cost to the company for making a bad hire. And you and I have talked plenty in the past about how challenging it is at the end of the day to make an incredible hire. So, I think it's kind of a non-issue because it's like any other underperformer. You're going to work hard to coach. Hopefully they figure out that, like, yeah, I should quit that other job and go all in on this job and become an incredible performer. But if not, they're going to ultimately get worked out or let go. So there's that. From the perspective of, again, from your argument about building relationships and how important it is to have that in-person interaction, this is a good, I think, opportunity for me to segue into why remote first is what I would argue is far more healthy for humans in general. Because yes, again, I do think that in-person interaction is always good, but you can do that. You can set that up. It doesn't need to happen daily or 3 times a week in order to build relationships with your colleagues and coworkers. I think KēSTA I.T is a case study in that. It just doesn't. It can absolutely happen without seeing each other in an office regularly. More importantly, for those individuals with a family, but even for those individuals who want to spend time with people that they've chosen to spend time with, outside of work, given the opportunity to not have to commute an hour a day, generally on average, given the opportunity to step out for a break and hang out with your kiddos for a few minutes, right? There's so much opportunity cost in forcing people to come back to the office. Here's the more important thing. Before I get to any statistics that I quickly Googled before we jumped on this call, at the end of the day, I think being given an option and a choice matters. You said it earlier, and I think we probably would agree that hybrid would be the best model. But if you're mandating to people that they have to come back, I'll give you an example. And it's funny, if anybody from Tech Systems is watching, they'll probably say, "Oh, sure, Scotty, we know why you really quit." But being told that I couldn't grow a beard and the type of vehicle I had to drive, or the amount of hours that I had to work, I thought that I didn't want to work a certain number of hours. I obviously didn't want to shave my face, that's clear. But I thought I didn't want to drive a certain kind of car. At the end of the day, guess what? I worked just as many hours in the job I took after I left as I had been, well, in our glory days of Tech Systems. So it's autonomy. It's the feeling of being given a choice and not be. It's managing people as adults and giving them the option and respecting their decision to choose, giving them some trust and autonomy, and only reeling that in if they're not performing. That I think is really why I can argue so strongly against this return to office trend that we're seeing. And I think if you look at it, it makes a lot of sense from an executive's perspective. If you're Google and you've spent billions on your campus, it's really hard to tell everybody, yeah, don't worry about showing up to it. There's a justification occurring here, but at the end of the day, to me, it's a tremendous mistake because you're going to lose so many talented engineers and or other, salespeople, product managers. Like there's so many valuable employees at an organization that are just not going to like that they're being dictated what they need to do, as opposed to being given the choice. So that I think is probably the crux of my argument. Why remote first, or even frankly, just a decision that you're giving your people versus being, mandating what they must do, is what we're seeing with return to office mandates, to my mind, is just a huge mistake. So I'll give you a chance to respond to that, and then I may jump into some statistics. I also think we got another comment, so we'll see if that's a question. But yeah, what do you think about that argument, Jeff?
I think you make a really good point because coming from someone who I've always said that in some ways I've had not a problem with authority, maybe a little bit of a problem with authority. I think in general, a lot of people feel the same way. Like, don't tell me what to do to a certain extent. So the argument of autonomy and freedom, I totally get. And I think most companies, I remember when I was working at Point Click Care, when we started talking about getting people to return to the office, we had a committee and we would talk about it and how we would do it and how we'd roll it out. And all the conversations from the leaders I worked with was, let's not mandate it. Let's make it a choice. And let's do things that encourage people to go back into the office. And so it was started with, okay, you can go back in. And then no one was going back in. Then it was, okay, well, let's start providing lunch for people. And occasionally people would come in for free lunch. But I think what a lot of companies have seen is that, and again, as you and I talked about arguing both sides of this, I definitely see your side. But I think what we're seeing is that a lot of people just don't want to go back back into the office, and because there's a lot of convenience of working remotely, and I enjoy that convenience of working remotely. But um, I don't think that companies or leadership would be asking people to go back in if they didn't see a lot of value in it. Not just that, hey, we have this really big building that we're paying a lot for and we want to get a return on that investment. Yeah, I think it truly is that they see a ton of value of getting people back into the office. And what I've heard is again, primarily culture and coaching, teaching, and mentoring. But to your point, should it be a mandate? Ideally, no. Should it be a mandate 5 days a week? I would say no to that. I think at least a couple of days a week would be great. At my previous company, I told my team when we had an office here locally, I'm going to go in every Friday at least. I'll be there probably 3 or 4 days a week. But for sure, every Friday, would love for you guys to come in. I'm not asking you to, but I would love to see you in person. And hey, let's grab lunch, or maybe we could do a happy hour together. And I think I had a team of 7 people on my team, and no one was coming in. So one, that speaks to me as a poor leader, or two, people just didn't want to go back into the office, which I get. One more thing I wanted to say real quick before we move on and talk more maybe about a comments or something else. But I did see a story on LinkedIn today. The headline was remote staff laid off 35% more. So it sounds like going into the office provides job security. So I just want to throw that out there.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because frankly, that was one thing. If I had to take the other side of the argument today, that's one area that I do think you can make a strong case for whatever reason. And I think, I'll take the cynic hat off and say that, okay, perhaps there are some things, in terms of team building, culture, creation of culture, training, building relationships. Maybe there are some reasons besides, hey, we've got this giant lease that we have to pay every month. It's silly that this building's sitting empty. But it does seem to trend to the top brass, the executives, and not even middle managers, but kind of director level and above that seem to be driving this. So if I were to take your side of the argument, I would say from a career progression perspective, there's an opportunity cost from working fully remote. And you just outlined it with regard to your team, right? Like, yeah, you didn't mandate it, but if there had been people that had showed up and gotten FaceTime with you, their leader, just by virtue of how we work as humans, like that person's probably going to be top of the list when it comes to promotion and leadership opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think between that and the 35% more layoffs for remote workers, that there is something to that from a career trajectory perspective. I also think there's a big difference between a remote first organization, like one that was created remote first, versus the organizations that went remote based on due to COVID and are now like, hey guys, remember how it was before? It was pretty great. Let's do that again. So again, here I am equivocating, and I promise you we'll get some more feedback on this from at least one individual if they're watching right now. The comments, I appreciate them. Both of them, first and foremost, the one that said that I win in a fight. Not sure I believe that, but appreciate the support.
Who said you would win in a fight?
You'll see, it's on the comments, dude. And then 2, the shout out for USU hockey. I'm a proud Utah State alum, and I played hockey there. Sounds kind of cool. It's club hockey. It's not as cool as it sounds, but it was fun. And we got a comment on USU hockey. Great, thanks. Go Aggies. So they give me questions.
So maybe for our next LinkedIn Live, what we need to do is a cage fight. You and I will get a cage. We'll train for 3 months, and we'll get in a cage. No.
There you go. Yep, you have to support your University of Utah red, and I'll support my Utah State Navy.
That's right.
But I think we jawed about this for probably long enough, Jeff, and I think that there are points on both sides. Honestly, now that we're maybe taking our, hey, let's argue, either side. I really do think that we're both right. And a remote first, there are downsides, a fully in office, there are downsides, and a hybrid, like especially if there's some autonomy for people to choose when they come in, how often they come in. And for those that are just exceptional performers, we make exceptions. And anybody who says, hey, that's not fair, you can point back to what I talked about earlier, which is look at the work product. And at the end of the day, if you can create that kind of work product, then yeah, you get special treatment. That's kind of how it works in a free market capitalistic environment, which most of the companies that we're talking about are operating in some semblance of that. So
I agree. The last argument I would make for return to the office is it will allow for office pranks. And one of the best office prank ever was when our great and powerful founder, Brian Elliott,
oh no.
prank on Rosales, put a very strong smelling bathroom device in his office that he was sharing with Matt Walton. And we had to suffer through at least a week, it may have been 2 weeks, of Will and Matt's office smelling like a bathroom. So I just would say that I mean, we're missing out on that. We're missing out on great things like that. Or, when we had the soft squishy balls that we used to throw around in the office at tech, and it hit each other in the head. So yeah, but
Well,
I
you
would
should
just
have led with that argument, Jeff. That's the strongest argument you've made for your side thus far.
exactly. But I think just to finish on this, if we're wrapping up, ideally, I would like to see a hybrid. I personally think that if you can get 2 days in the office, 3 remote, or 3 in the office, 2 remote, that's the right balance. I don't think you need to be in the office every single day, but I think it would be better for people to see each other in person.
And I personally think that the amount of the talent pool you open up and the fact that you can get people all over the globe, if not all over the country, that can work for your organization that would not be able to do that if they had to relocate and come into an office twice a week. It's the upside for that if you're intentional and create good programs around making sure that relationship building is happening, making sure that you've got the right tools for that collaboration when it comes to training and development, and then trying to nip in the bud anyone who seems like they're absent at times because they're working another job. Remote first is clearly the winner. So we'll let the people decide. Thanks to those of you who bore with us throughout this. I think there's a handful that are still on from the very start. Appreciate you being here. Always looking for additional topic ideas. Jeff and I love to debate. We do it often. So, let us know what else you'd like to see us debate in the future. Otherwise, thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming.
All right, Jeff. Thanks, man.